Okay, so last week we promised you I was going to tell you the story about how we saved the synagogue. At the end of last week's class, I think Sonia told us something about those people living in their Sheva. So I said that we had the honor of helping out the Be'er Sheva. So we'll start off with that, and then we'll move on to the regular class about the Akedah Yitzchak, the Avram bringing Isaac on the altar. First, the story. So a number of years ago, there was a group of boys that came to our shul, and I was speaking to them, and they were Chabad boys, like a Chabad class of boys, nice boys, sweet kids. And they asked me, Rabbi Plotkin, they said that maybe you have a good story to share of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Maybe something happened with you because you went on Shlichut in 1985, you came to Toronto, and the Rebbe passed away in 1994. He had a stroke in 92, but maybe in those 5, 6, 7 years while you were on your mission in Markham, Ontario, surely you have a good story. Something that happened with you and the Rebbe. They were looking for something inspirational. And, I racked my brain. I was thinking, I couldn't remember anything specific that happened with me and the Rebbe personally in those years. I mean, there were different interactions I had with the Rebbe over the years, but nothing with my mission here in Shlichut on Toronto. And I felt very bad. I couldn't tell them a story, something exciting, something to inspire them. And that Saturday night, I was speaking to them. It was on Thursday night. They were with me. And that Saturday night, I happened to be watching a video. Every Saturday night, they come up with a new video from the Rebbe. So I have a subscription. It's called Living Torah. You can get it yourself. I have every time different things the Rebbe said, or stories with the Rebbe. And I had the subscription. I did, so they called me, well, let's give a look, see what's on. And I give a look. And as I'm watching there, I see a fellow from Toronto, a businessman. He goes up to the Rebbe. He says to the Rebbe, I'm here on a mission from Rabbi Plotkin in Toronto, in Markham, Ontario. And I'm listening to this, I'm saying, wow, Suddenly something is developing over here. And I see on the video, he tells the Rebbe, he says the community there is considering buying a new building. And this is before we moved into our building on Green Lane. And we're considering to buy a new building. And he's asking the Rebbe's blessing. So here I have a letter from him. And I came back to me, I reminded myself that years ago, I had to ask the Rebbe for bracha to buy a new building. We were young then, we wanted a building. So this fellow gives the Rebbe the letter. So the Rebbe takes the letter and tells his fellow, his name is Mr. Isaacovich, he's a businessman here. So I remembered, I gave him the letter to give to the Rebbe at the time. And he gives it to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe says, tell Plotkin that we're very, very busy these days here. And I don't have time to read the letter. But I'm going to give you the whole answer right now. I'll give you the answer right now. He says, today is the month of Adar. And he tells Azakovich, tell it, give it over to him. Make sure you'll give it over. This is the month of Adar, which is a month of good mazel for Jews. He says, tell him he's going to have great mazel in what he's doing. And tomorrow is the beginning of the month of Nisan. So tell him that he's going to have, Nisan means miracles. So he'll have miracles. So he'll have mazel and nisim together. And he says, this is the answer he gave to him. And he says, I want him to make sure that he buys it before Shabbos. That he puts down a deposit for the building already before Shabbos. That part I remembered because the guy came to me and said, the Rebbe says you should buy it already before Shabbos. But I didn't hear the whole story and the whole episode. So when I heard this story, it was really heartwarming, because here I thought that we weren't getting any inspiration from the Rebbe, but I couldn't give anything to the boys. And here that Saturday night, I saw this whole episode which was concerning me, and how the Rebbe encouraged me then to buy the building, and then it'll have a good mazel and it'll be a good miracles. That's like sort of bashert that I get there. But this is the story that keeps on giving. So a year later or so, I was in New York, and I was in a shul there. It was the kinnis of the shluchim that weekend. So I was in one of the synagogues. So they asked me, they saw me there in the shul. They knew me, the guys. So they said, maybe you want to say a few words. So, so I got up in front of the shul, like a lot of people there. And I thought I'd share with them this story. I was telling the people, I said, you never know. You think you don't have any answers from the Rebbe. You think you don't have any inspiration. But years later, you turn up, you put on your screen, and you see the Rebbe gives you a whole answer about good mazel and miracles and life. And I told them this whole story over. And people liked the story. But what happened afterwards was, there was a fellow that wrote an article. I saw a few months later. A fellow wrote an article in the Kfar Chabad, it's a Lubavitch magazine. And he said, he was a regular writer there. And he says, last Kinus HaShluchim, Shluchim all got together. I was very depressed. He says, because I am a shliach in Zaporozhye in Ukraine. Zaporozhye, Ukraine is in Ukraine. And Zaporozhye is like somewhere, I don't know where, it's like somewhere. He says, I was feeling very depressed. And I was considering leaving my post. I didn't know. So I said to myself, you know what? I'm looking for a sign to stay. And when I arrived, I looked the whole kinus. I was hearing all the workshops and all the speakers and everything. And I happened to go into a shul Shabbos by day. And there was a rabbi speaking there. And the rabbi said that sometimes you think you're not getting an answer, but the whole answer is there. And you wake up, you go the next night, you open your screen and you give a look, you see the Rebbe gives you a whole story, all brachas, all the best blessings. He said, and I took that to mean that the Rebbe was giving me an answer through this. And he said, that's what made me decide to remain in Zaporozhye in Ukraine, because of that inspiration that I received from that. Because telling me that you think I got an answer to continue and to stay and to work and to build. That's what he felt it was. Anyways, this past Gimel Tammuz, the yahrzeit of the Rebbe, I also decided to go to New York to go to the Rebbe's oil this year. And this is where I get to the Be'er Sheva part. I mentioned last week about the survivors in Be'er Sheva. So I got up to speak. I came there randomly. I was there, and they had like a major program for Gimel Tammuz in Crown Heights for the Rebbe's yahrzeit. So I decided I'll go over there and sit in the crowd. But as I'm sitting there, someone taps me on the shoulder and says, Rabbi Plotkin, maybe you want to say a few words in English, because most of the speakers are in Hebrew and in Yiddish. Maybe you want to speak in English. So it must have been like 1,000, 2,000 people there in the room. And they asked me to speak. Okay, I didn't prepare anything. She says, okay, you have 5 minutes to prepare. So I got up and I spoke. Actually, I got to speak. And I thought this story is a great story, about the Rebbe, even though he's passed away. It's a Gimel Tammuz, and this is like inspirational. The Rebbe comes and gives you messages later on too. You receive a message when you're least expecting it, and he gives you the strength to continue and go on. And even though the Rebbe's passed away, his spirit lives on. And I told them the whole story about how I received the bracha from the Rebbe to buy a building and to go and to buy the building right away before Shabbos, not to wait, and don't wait for any answers. You have the whole answer here. Anyways, after I spoke, at the end, there was a whole group, a whole contingency from Be'er Sheva there that were there. And the guy says, I want you to come over and meet our group. I said, why? He says, I'll tell you in a minute. So I came over there, and I sat down with this group from Be'er Sheva, and the one guy there said that, they started building there a big Chabad community shul center in Be'er Sheva, and they're having challenges, and they're running out of funds, and it's difficult, and they don't know what to do. And they came to Crown Heights to receive from the Rebbe an answer that to tell them whether to continue or not, or to give them a little bit of inspiration, because they're running out of funds and it's hard. And so they said, when they heard me speak about the Rebbe telling me to buy the building and don't wait for anything, do it right away, they received from that an inspiration to complete their beautiful world center in Be'er Sheva. So you never know how you can influence people around the world. There's one story that keeps on giving. Why was I called up to speak there? I have no idea. Like, they ran out of speakers. There were more than enough speakers. But somebody decided they need an English speaker, so they asked me to speak, and I happened to tell that story about the Rebbe telling me to buy the building, and these guys are there, and they felt that this was their message from their visit there for the Rebbe's yahrzeit, that they should continue to finish a shul in Be'er Sheva. So I'm looking forward to go to the ground opening, the opening of the synagogue. And Baruch Hashem, we have a hand in Be'er Sheva. So this was because you mentioned last week about the community there of Holocaust survivors all moved to Be'er Sheva. So we've had an influence of Be'er Sheva in Israel as well. You all know Be'er Sheva is not very far from the south of Israel, where everything happened around in that area. I mean, they never quite got to Be'er Sheva, but that's where the 10/7 happened. Was not too far from that whole region. So, anyways, that's the story. But let's get now back to learning the Siddur. We're learning now about the patriarchs. We started last week speaking about how we're asking God, before we start to daven, the first thing we do, whether it's in the Amidah or the beginning of davening, we turn to Hashem and says, remember our parents, because we had good parents. Avrohom, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, what they did and how God made with them a covenant, the covenant of Hashem with Abraham. Actually, the name Be'er Sheva also means Shavua. Be'er Shavua, the fountain of the promise of God to the Jewish people. That's why it's called Be'er Sheva. Some say. So the Sheva comes from the word Shavua, a promise. So God promised us. So today too, we also turn to Hashem and we say, Hashem, you promised us. Promised our patriarchs, our matriarchs, don't forsake us. Remember us in their merits. Maybe we don't have perfect merits, but in their merits, save our people, right? Bring back the hostages, bring back the soldiers, finalize the war already. No more korbanos, no more sacrifices. But this takes me to the next subject is, we make a whole spiel now about Avrohom Avinu, that he brought Yitzchak onto the altar and he listened to God. Famous story about God wakes up Avrohom Avinu up one day and he says, I want to know that you're faithful to me, you're a faithful servant. I want you to go and take your one and only child, Yitzchak, onto the altar. And this is considered one of the greatest things that the Jewish people did in our history, that we say it every day in the davening. And we read the whole section about Avrohom Avinu being prepared to bring his son Isaac onto the altar. He wakes up Isaac and he says, come, we're going somewhere. Avram says, Hashem will show us where to go. and his son Yitzchak, even more a greater level. He just listened to his father, and he went with him. He went with him onto Mount Moriah. Mount Moriah, we all know, is the Temple Mount today, right? That's where the Kotel is, the Kotel Maravi, and that's the holiest place in the world. That's where it says that Adam was created there, and that's the place that the Evan Shasia, that's the place where the whole world was created. From that point, that's the center of the universe. And then when Noah, after he landed on Mount Ararat and he brought his sacrifices, it's brought down that he went to bring sacrifices also on that same place. I guess it was a bit of a journey. But then Avram brings Yitzchak on the altar. And that's the same altar. That's also the place. Hara Moriah, Mount Moriah. So God tells Abraham to bring Yitzchak on the altar. And Abraham is the faithful servant. And he goes ahead and he goes with his son Yitzchak. And it's a 3-day journey. And they go all the way to the top of the mountain. And Abraham starts to perform an act of ties Yitzchak down onto the altar. And just as he's about to takes out his knife and is about to bring his son onto as a sacrifice, God says to him, the angel says to him, stop, do not do this. God is not a vengeful God. God doesn't, he's not a God of child sacrifice. You don't do this kind of stuff. We don't believe in this, right? And God just wanted to see how faithful you were to him. And because you were such a merciful person, and you gave up your mercy in the sake of the cause, and you listened to what I told you, because of that, I'll turn you into a great nation, and I will give you children as many as the stars of the heaven, and etc., etc. So that's more or less the story in a nutshell, the story of the Akedah. Many people ask the question, Avram Avinu never brought his son he never sacrificed him, right? And how many Jewish people have actually sacrificed their children for being Jewish over the years, right? Really sacrificed their children. How many Jews died al Kiddush Hashem, for the sanctification of God's name? This year alone, how many people went to war and put their life at risk and they died because they gave up their lives for the Jewish people, for Hashem? So why is Avram considered such a hero? That we say that Avram Avinu was such a hero. He was considered the merit of Avram Avinu. But the merit of the Holocaust is not enough. Or you have to go all the way back to Avram Avinu, right? 6 million, 1.5 million children were sacrificed because of the Jewishness. And truth is that, it wasn't like somebody brought the child onto the altar, but they were pretty much brought onto the altar. Many stories throughout our history, in the times of the Crusaders, in the times of the people that sacrificed their children rather than converting to idolatrous religions. Story of Hannah and her 7 sons. She gave up her 7 sons rather than bow down to the idols of the king. So we have stories of people that actually, not just they brought the child on the altar, but they actually gave up their children. These are incredible stories throughout our history. So why do we read a story of Abraham 3,800 years ago, and we speak about Abraham being such a hero in what he did? How come? And what's the answer? The answer that's given is that Avrohom was the first. He was number one. He broke the path for all of us in the future generations. He gave us the strength to overcome all obstacles and overcome all challenges. Because Avram Avinu started it, and he put it in our blood. He put it in our blood that we're prepared to go in fire and water for Hashem. Jews over the years, we were ready to be Jewish at all costs. Despite all the anti-Semitism, and despite all the things that happened to us, and despite losing many of our best, it was all because of Avraham. Him with his act of self-sacrifice, even though he never actually gave up his son, but he broke the path. It's like sometimes you go in a forest and you don't know where to go. You see already there's a path there already. Somebody has already trodden a path, and you know that's the way out of the forest. Avram Avinu was the first, and he opened the path for the self-sacrifice of Jews for all the generations. And because he is the first to put himself out for Hashem and put himself out for the cause, we inherited his DNA. And we inherited his Jewish pride and Jewish strength to overcome all obstacles. And that's why we read about it every day. Because being the first is never easy. Being the pioneer, as we call it, being the one that breaks the way, opens the path for all the future generations. And that was Avram Avinu. And that's why we give him the credit. So yes, there might have been greater martyrs throughout history than Avram, but Avram Avinu was the first. But at the same time that he broke the path open for martyrdom, he showed us also that God doesn't need martyrdom. He just needs the dedication of martyrdom. God doesn't need the martyrdom itself. We don't believe in that as Jews. And that's how we differ than a lot of other religions, that they believe that the key to going to heaven is martyrdom. We as Jews, we don't worship martyrdom. If it comes our way, we're prepared to do that great mitzvah as well. But we don't seek to die for the cause. We want to live for the cause. That's what Jewishness is. And that's shown over here also, because God tells Abraham, do not bring your child, do not slaughter your child, chas v'shalom. And the story goes that he looked around and he saw a little sheep on the side. He brought the sheep, and that was the sacrifice. But he brought the sheep, but he didn't bring a child, a human. To teach us that as Jews, we have to be prepared for self-sacrifice, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to live as Jews. Right? And that in that way we differ than a lot of the people. We want to live. As the Torah says in many places, V'chai bohem, and you shall live with them. Oh, it's a little, my beard looks probably very white, no? And you shall live with them. That's the key as Jews. Okay, so that's the end of today's class. If you have any questions, I shared with you a story, and I gave you the concept, just to wrap up, concept of being the first, of being a pioneer is always the hardest thing. Chalutz, and that was Avram Avinu was the Chalutz. And the third point that we spoke today about was that in Judaism, we don't worship self-sacrifice. We're prepared for self-sacrifice if it comes our way. But what we as Jews need to do is to live as Jews in a self-sacrificing way, meaning we give up our comforts and all that to do what's right, but to live in a Jewish. Anybody have any questions? all those lines? Everybody, okay, wish everybody a guten Shabbos. Good year to everybody. And
Good Shabbos to everyone.
good Shabbos. Yeah.
Shabbat Shalom. Thanks, Rabbi.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Like it.
You too.